He whispered something to the Apache woman, and now she awaits the coming night in silence. The town was quiet, with streets made of dusty soil that seemed to shimmer in the warm light. Wooden buildings lined the roads, their paint faded from years of sun and wind. The air smelled faintly of baked bread and pine from the distant forest. Daniel, a young historian, had spent months preparing for this trip. He had read countless books and old letters, trying to understand the life and culture of the Apache people, but nothing could replace the feeling of being there, in the place where history had truly unfolded. He walked slowly, letting his eyes wander over the surroundings. Children ran in the open spaces, laughing and chasing each other. An old man sat outside a small shop, whittling a piece of wood with careful, precise movements. Daniel noticed a woman in the distance, standing quietly by a low fence. She moved with a calm grace that caught his attention. There was something in the way she held herself, something both proud and gentle that made him stop for a moment. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes seemed to see far beyond the present moment, as if she were connected to something invisible yet deeply important. Daniel took a few steps closer, unsure whether he should approach. He had learned that showing respect was essential, especially when meeting someone who was deeply connected to their heritage. He remembered the advice of his mentor: listen first, speak later, observe before you act. Your curiosity should never feel like intrusion. With that in mind, he continued walking, keeping a polite distance. The woman, whose name he would later learn was Aeon, did not look at him immediately. She seemed lost in thought, her gaze directed at the horizon, where the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. Daniel noticed the small details, the way her hands rested lightly on the fence, the quiet rhythm of her breathing, and the faint scar on her wrist, shaped almost like a small crescent moon. Each detail seemed to tell a story, though he did not yet know what that story was. Finally, Aeon looked toward him. Her eyes were sharp yet soft, carrying both curiosity and caution. Daniel felt a slight nervousness, but he reminded himself to stay calm. He approached slowly, making sure his movements were gentle and deliberate. "Hello," he said quietly, unsure if his voice would break the moment's quiet magic. "I am Daniel. I am researching the history of your community. I hope I am not intruding." Aeon's lips curved into a small, polite smile. She did not speak immediately but nodded in acknowledgement. Daniel felt a mix of relief and anticipation. Here was someone who could connect him to the past in a way that books never could. He had read stories about the Apache, but those were written from the perspective of outsiders. Meeting someone from the community was entirely different. It was real, immediate, and full of complexity. Daniel noticed that she seemed hesitant, as if she were weighing the decision to trust him or not. He remembered another piece of advice from his mentor: sometimes the truth is revealed not through words but through silence. So he remained still, letting the quiet stretch between them. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the soft scent of the nearby river. A bird called from the branches above, its song bright and clear. Daniel took a deep breath, trying to calm the nervous excitement that had settled in his chest. After a moment, Aeon spoke, her voice calm and steady. "You wish to know our stories," she said. "But stories are not always easy to tell. They are like rivers. They flow, but sometimes they hide deep rocks beneath the surface. Are you ready to see what lies beneath?" Daniel nodded earnestly. "I want to understand," he said. "I want to learn and remember. I promise to respect whatever you share." For a long moment, Aeon said nothing more. She turned her gaze back to the horizon, her expression unreadable. Daniel watched her carefully. He felt that this was a pivotal moment, not just for his research but for something larger. There was a sense of history pressing gently yet insistently on the present. Every movement, every glance carried weight. He realized that he was not merely observing history, he was stepping into it. Then, almost imperceptibly, she shifted her stance. She lifted her hand slightly and pointed toward a small path leading into the hills. "Come," she said, "walk with me. There are places where the past is still alive. You may see it if you pay attention." Daniel felt a thrill of excitement mixed with reverence. He followed her carefully, matching his steps to hers, noticing how her feet moved lightly over the rough ground. As they walked, Aeon spoke softly about the land, how the hills had witnessed countless events, both joyful and sorrowful. She spoke of ancestors who had lived and worked in these areas, whose memories were woven into every tree, rock, and river. Daniel listened intently, trying to absorb every word, every pause, every nuance in her tone. At one point she stopped by an old oak tree, its branches stretched wide as if offering protection. She gestured toward the trunk. "Many years ago," she began, "this tree was the center of gathering. Families would come together here to share food, songs, and stories. Every ring of this tree holds a story, even those we have forgotten." Her hand brushed lightly against the rough bark, and Daniel could see her connection to it, not just as an observer, but as someone who felt the echoes of those long-gone voices. They continued along the path until they reached a small clearing where wildflowers grew in gentle clusters. Aeon motioned for Daniel to sit on a fallen log. "There are truths," she said quietly, "that are rarely spoken aloud. Sometimes they are whispered like secrets carried by the wind. Today I will share one with you, but listen carefully. It is not just a story, it is a memory." Daniel leaned forward, eager yet respectful. He felt the gravity of the moment. Aeon spoke of her grandmother, who had taught her the importance of listening before speaking, of observing before acting, and of honoring the quiet spaces in life where wisdom often hides. She spoke of events from decades ago, of challenges and choices, of moments of joy and sorrow that had shaped her family and community. Daniel took careful notes in his mind, not wanting to miss anything, knowing that this moment would stay with him forever. Then, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Daniel did something he had rehearsed in his mind but never expected to do in reality. He leaned slightly closer and whispered a discovery he had made while researching old letters and archives, something that confirmed part of her family's story, long believed to be lost or misunderstood. It was a truth that had been hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Aeon remained silent. She looked at Daniel, her eyes reflecting a complex mix of emotions: surprise, recognition, sorrow, and perhaps relief. The wind moved through the clearing, rustling the leaves and carrying the faint scent of the wildflowers. Daniel could feel the weight of the moment pressing gently between them. He did not speak further, sensing that words might disturb something delicate, something sacred. For several minutes they sat in silence. The sun finally kissed the horizon, leaving a soft glow that lingered in the sky. Daniel realized that silence itself had become a part of the story. It was not emptiness. It was full of understanding, respect, and shared recognition. Aeon's presence, her quiet grace, and her careful listening had made him aware of the responsibility that came with knowing and sharing history. As the evening air grew cooler, Aeon finally stood and brushed off her hands. "It is time," she said softly, and without another word began walking back toward the town. Daniel followed, mindful to stay at a respectful distance, feeling that he had witnessed the beginning of something profound. Something that could not be rushed or forced, only observed and honored. When they reached the edge of the town, Aeon stopped and looked at him once more. Her eyes held a depth that Daniel could not fully comprehend, but he felt an unspoken message. Some truths are meant to be carried quietly. Some stories are meant to live in the heart before being spoken aloud. He nodded silently, understanding that their encounter was not just about history or research. It was about connection, respect, and the power of listening. As Daniel watched her walk away, he felt a mix of awe and gratitude. He knew that this moment would shape not only his research, but also the way he approached life itself. He had met someone who embodied the strength of her ancestors and the wisdom of silence. And in that quiet, unspoken understanding, he felt the first threads of a story that would unfold in ways he could not yet imagine. Aeon returned to her small home at the edge of the town, a modest space surrounded by the soft shadows of the hills. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows, painting warm patterns across the floor. She moved quietly, deliberately, as though each action mattered, each gesture a part of some silent ritual she had always followed. She set down the basket she carried, filled with herbs and dried flowers collected from the hills earlier that day. The air smelled faintly of sage and chamomile, calming and familiar. She sat by the window for a moment, her hands resting gently in her lap. Her mind was not on the work she had left undone, nor on the simple meals she would prepare later. Her thoughts were with the young man, Daniel, who had come into her life for a brief, yet weighty moment. His presence had been respectful, attentive, and sincere in a way that few outsiders could achieve. And then there had been the whisper, the words he had spoken carefully, with a mixture of excitement and reverence. Aeon thought of those words over and over, turning them in her mind as one might turn a stone over in a gentle stream, examining every side. The truth he had revealed had been something she suspected, but hearing it aloud had given it weight and clarity. It was a truth about her family, a piece of history that had been clouded with uncertainty for decades. Some might have brushed it off or dismissed it, but Aeon could feel its presence deep inside her, vibrating with the energy of countless memories, some spoken, most unspoken. She rose slowly and moved toward the small table in the corner of her room. A stack of worn papers and letters lay there, remnants of research her grandmother had started years ago. Aeon picked them up carefully, smoothing each one with her fingers as though she were touching a part of the past itself. Her grandmother had written about ancestors whose names were rarely spoken, about journeys made across harsh landscapes, and about the quiet resilience that had allowed her people to endure hardships and change. Reading these letters now, Aeon could see connections she had not noticed before. The story Daniel had whispered fit into these old words, completing a circle that had long been open. The sun had disappeared completely behind the hills, leaving the sky a deep, fading blue. The first stars began to twinkle, small points of light in the vast expanse above. Aeon lit a single lamp, its warm glow filling the room, casting soft shadows on the walls. She did not speak, did not move beyond her gentle movements, but her mind was alive with thought. She remembered moments from her childhood, her grandmother guiding her hand to plant seeds in the garden, telling her that patience and care would yield something meaningful, even if it took years. The lessons of patience, of listening, of seeing what others could not see, all seemed connected to the moment with Daniel. She thought of the people in her community, the neighbors and friends who had known her since she was a child. Most of them would never understand the weight of this moment, and that was acceptable. Not every truth was meant for public sharing. Some truths were meant to live in silence until the right time, when they could be understood fully and respectfully. Aeon had always known that. It was a part of the way her grandmother had raised her, the way her family had taught her to observe, to honor, and to wait. Night deepened, and the wind carried the soft sound of rustling leaves from the hills outside. Aeon walked to the edge of the small porch, looking out across the valley. The houses of the town glowed faintly in the distance, windows reflecting the light of lamps and candles inside. Somewhere far off, a dog barked once, then silence returned. The stillness was comforting, a companion to her thoughts. She had always loved the quiet hours between sunset and the full dark of night, when the world slowed down and one could hear even the smallest sounds. Aeon thought again of Daniel, of the curiosity and care in his eyes. He had listened with genuine interest, without judgment or interruption. It was rare to encounter someone so intent on understanding without seeking to impose their own narrative. That quality, rare as it was, had made his words, his whispered revelation, even more powerful. She could feel its echo in her chest, a quiet vibration that reminded her of her own place in the long chain of her family's story. She moved back inside, sitting at her table and opening an old notebook. Her pen hovered over the paper, hesitant, as if the words needed to be chosen carefully. Slowly, she began to write, not for anyone to read, but for herself. She wrote about the day's events, about Daniel's presence, about the words whispered, and about the feelings they stirred. Writing allowed her to process the moment, to honor it without breaking it. Every line was deliberate, every word a small act of connection with the past, the present, and the future. Hours passed. Aeon did not notice time in the usual way. The moon rose, full and bright, casting silver light across the room. Shadows of the lamp danced alongside the shadows from the moonlight, creating a quiet interplay of light and dark. She paused in her writing and looked out the window again. The night had a way of holding her attention, of making her feel part of something larger, something beyond the ordinary day-to-day. The stars overhead seemed to speak in a silent language, a language she understood through instinct, memory, and respect. Her thoughts drifted back to her grandmother. She remembered how her grandmother would say that sometimes the most important stories are those that were never told aloud. "Listen to the quiet," she had said. "Feel the rhythm of the world around you, and the story will come." Aeon understood now that Daniel had, in his own way, helped her hear a story she had always sensed but never fully recognized. It was not just about knowing facts. It was about feeling the weight of the memory, allowing it to settle in her heart. Aeon got up from the table and walked to a small shelf where she kept family mementos, photographs, a piece of pottery, a carved wooden figure. She touched each item lightly, recalling the stories associated with them. Her fingers lingered on a small locket, the surface worn smooth by years of handling. Inside was a tiny photograph of her grandmother as a young woman, smiling softly, eyes full of life and quiet strength. Aeon held it close for a moment, feeling the connection across time, across generations. Returning to her chair, she felt a calm determination. The whispered truth was now a part of her. It would not overwhelm her, nor would it disappear. It was a bridge, connecting what had been lost or forgotten with what was present now. She understood that this knowledge carried responsibility. Not in the sense of correcting history or seeking recognition, but in the sense of honoring memory, keeping it alive, and letting it shape her understanding of the world. Outside, the wind carried a soft rustling of leaves, and a faint chill settled over the porch. Aeon wrapped herself in a warm shawl and returned there for a while. She sat quietly, listening to the subtle sounds of the night, the distant hoot of an owl, the soft rush of air over the hills, the faint murmurs of life from the town below. Each sound felt amplified, each detail alive. In that quiet, she felt a sense of peace. She was alone, yes, but she was also deeply connected to her ancestors, to the land, and to the story that had been whispered into her life. Hours passed, and eventually the town became completely still. Aeon remained on the porch, waiting, as if the night itself had a message for her. The moon moved slowly across the sky, and she felt the rhythm of time passing in a way that was both gentle and profound. The quiet was no longer empty, it was full of meaning. She realized that some truths are not meant to be rushed or spoken immediately. They are meant to be absorbed, felt, and carried silently until the moment is right. By the time she returned inside, she was no longer restless. She placed the locket and the notebook back on their shelves, arranged the small items on her table, and let the calm of the night settle over her home. She knew that Daniel's words had set something in motion, something that would continue to unfold over time. She did not know exactly what that would look like, but she felt ready to meet it when it arrived. Finally, Aeon lay down to rest, her mind still turning over the day's events, her heart carrying the quiet resonance of the whispered truth. Sleep came slowly, gentle and unforced, as if the night itself was a guardian holding her safely while she dreamed. In those dreams, she wandered through hills and valleys, past and present interwoven, feeling the lives of those who had come before her and the lives yet to come. When she awoke in the early morning hours, the world was hushed and waiting. The story was not finished, but she was ready. Aeon knew that silence, patience, and careful attention were just as important as speaking, writing, or sharing. The whispered words had become part of her, a seed planted in the rich soil of her memory, destined to grow in its own time. And she would wait in quiet strength for the next moment, for the next revelation, for the next step in the unfolding story of her life and her family. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and pine from the hills. Aeon rose slowly, stretching her arms, feeling the quiet energy of the day settle into her bones. She did not rush. The world outside her small home had its own rhythm, and she had learned to move with it, to observe it, and to honor it. The whispered truth from the day before still lingered in her mind like a soft echo, gentle yet insistent, reminding her that some stories needed time to fully unfold. She decided to begin her morning as she often did, by tending to the small garden outside her home. Even in the cool hours, the soil was rich and dark, the plants reaching eagerly toward the pale morning light. Aeon knelt carefully, touching the earth with her fingers, feeling its texture, its temperature, its quiet life. The process was meditative, grounding her, helping her sort the swirl of emotions the previous day had stirred. She thought of Daniel's words and of the history they had touched upon together. They were not just words, they were bridges between past and present, between memory and truth. After a while, she moved to the small table near the window to prepare a simple breakfast. The sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, illuminating the small kitchen and creating a warm, comforting atmosphere. She made tea from dried herbs, the steam curling slowly into the air. Each movement she made was careful and deliberate, yet effortless, a reflection of years of practice and a deep understanding of her own pace. She sat by the window, sipping the tea and watching the hills. The wind rustled gently through the trees, carrying soft whispers of sound that seemed almost like voices from the past. As she drank her tea, her thoughts drifted to the town below. The quiet streets were beginning to come alive. Shopkeepers opened their doors, children ran to school, and the sound of laughter and conversation floated up from the distance. Aeon did not feel the need to join immediately. She had learned that observation was as important as participation. Sitting quietly, she felt herself connected to the pulse of life in the town while remaining apart enough to reflect on the lessons of history, family, and the stories that had been passed down to her. After breakfast, she decided to take a walk along the path that led into the hills, the same path she had taken with Daniel the day before. There was something comforting about walking the land that had shaped her ancestors, something that gave her a sense of continuity and perspective. The hills were soft and rolling, dotted with wildflowers, small shrubs, and the occasional tree that had grown tall and strong over decades. The sound of her footsteps on the dirt path was steady, calming, and somehow connected her to the generations who had walked there before her. As she walked, Aeon thought about the stories her grandmother had told her. Her grandmother had been a careful storyteller, weaving lessons about patience, respect, and connection into tales about family and the land. Aeon had always appreciated these stories, but now, after hearing Daniel's whispered revelation, they felt deeper, richer, and more urgent. She could sense how the threads of history, memory, and personal experience were all interwoven, forming a fabric that was both fragile and strong. Reaching a small clearing in the hills, Aeon paused. The view stretched wide, showing the valley below, the town in the distance, and the distant hills fading into the morning mist. She could see the sun climbing higher, casting golden light across the landscape. The sight was familiar, yet always new, always alive with quiet wonder. She sat down on a smooth rock, letting the warmth of the sun touch her skin and the gentle wind brush against her face. In this moment, she felt both grounded and free, connected to the past while aware of the present. Her mind wandered back to the events of the previous day. Daniel's presence had been respectful and sincere, his curiosity genuine. He had spoken carefully, aware of the importance of his words, and had shared a truth that resonated deeply with Aeon. It was a truth that revealed a part of her family history that had been hidden or misunderstood, something that now had to be carried forward thoughtfully. The awareness of this responsibility was not burdensome. Rather, it felt like an opportunity to honor her ancestors and to connect with the continuity of life itself. Aeon decided to continue her walk further into the hills, following a narrow trail that led toward a small stream. The water flowed gently, sparkling in the sunlight, reflecting the sky above like a moving mirror. She knelt by the edge, letting her fingers trail in the cool water, feeling its smooth, constant movement. The stream seemed to speak to her in a quiet language, carrying stories of time, change, and endurance. She thought about how her ancestors had lived in harmony with this land, learning its rhythms, respecting its boundaries, and finding sustenance in its gifts. As she sat by the stream, Aeon noticed a small bird perched on a nearby branch, singing a clear, bright song. Its melody was simple yet full of life, a reminder that even in quiet moments, the world was teeming with stories waiting to be noticed. She watched it for a while, appreciating its presence, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond words. It was as if the land itself, the wind, the water, and even the smallest creatures were part of a larger story, a story that included her and the generations before her. Aeon continued along the trail until she reached a familiar spot, a cluster of ancient stones arranged in a circle, believed by her community to mark a place of reflection and remembrance. She approached them reverently, noting the wear and texture of the stones, smoothed by time and weather. She sat quietly in the center of the circle, closing her eyes, and allowed her thoughts to settle. The whispered truth from the day before, the letters from her grandmother, and the stories of her ancestors all seemed to converge in this sacred space. She did not speak. She did not need to. The silence itself carried meaning, a language understood through presence and attention. Time seemed to stretch and bend in the hills. Aeon could feel the day moving forward, the sun climbing higher, yet it felt as though she were suspended in a moment that existed outside ordinary time. Memories came and went, her grandmother's voice, the laughter of her childhood friends, the quiet strength of her parents, and the gentle guidance of teachers and elders who had shaped her understanding of life. Each memory was a thread, weaving together a tapestry of experience and knowledge that grounded her in the present while connecting her to the past. Eventually, Aeon rose and walked back toward the town, taking a slow, deliberate path that allowed her to notice every detail: the curve of a tree branch, the shimmer of sunlight on leaves, the distant sound of a river moving through the valley. She felt a sense of gratitude for the world around her, for the life she had inherited, and for the moments of clarity that allowed her to carry her family's history with awareness and care. Back in the town, she paused at the small market, watching as people went about their morning routines. She saw familiar faces, neighbors greeting one another, children laughing as they played, shopkeepers arranging their goods. The ordinary rhythms of life continued, yet Aeon now perceived them differently. Every small act, every gesture, every conversation carried weight and meaning when viewed through the lens of memory and history. She understood that life was a collection of such moments, each contributing to the larger story of a community, a family, and a place. Aeon made her way to a quiet spot near the edge of town, a small park where wildflowers grew among the grass. She sat on a bench and pulled out her notebook, writing carefully about the morning, her walk in the hills, the stream, the circle of stones, and the connection she had felt to her ancestors. Writing helped her process the emotions and thoughts that were swirling inside her. It was not a record for anyone else but a private reflection, a way to honor the truth she carried and to make sense of the quiet revelations she had experienced. As midday approached, Aeon stood and stretched. The sun was high now, casting bright light over the town and hills. She took a deep breath, feeling the air fill her lungs and invigorate her spirit. There was work to do, small tasks, daily routines, and the preparation of food and care for her home, but she approached them with a renewed sense of purpose. Every movement, every decision, was infused with the awareness of her connection to history and the responsibility to carry it forward respectfully. Even as the day continued, Aeon felt a quiet anticipation. The whispered truth from the day before was not something she needed to act upon immediately. It was a seed that would grow in its own time. She understood that life unfolds in stages, that some moments are meant to be experienced fully in the present before their significance can be fully understood. She welcomed the patience required, the mindfulness, and the quiet strength needed to honor both the past and the present. As evening approached, Aeon returned to her home, carrying a small bundle of herbs and wildflowers from the hills. She placed them carefully in a bowl near the window where the fading sunlight would touch them. The day had been rich with reflection, observation, and connection. She felt a calm energy, a sense of readiness for what the coming night might bring. Though she did not yet know how the story would continue, she trusted in the process, in the wisdom of silence, and in the guidance of her ancestors. She prepared a simple meal and ate quietly, savoring each bite, each taste, and each sensation. Afterwards, she lit a small lamp and returned to her chair by the window, letting the shadows and soft light create a space of contemplation. The town below had settled into evening, the sounds of life softening into quiet hums. Aeon could feel the rhythm of the day winding down, yet her mind remained alert, aware of the layers of meaning that surrounded her, and ready to meet the next chapter of her unfolding story. As night fell over the town, a soft, cool breeze moved through the streets and hills. The sky had darkened into deep shades of navy and indigo, sprinkled with countless stars twinkling faintly in the distance. Aeon stood at the edge of her porch, wrapped in a warm shawl, her gaze fixed on the horizon. There was a stillness in the air, a quiet pause between day and night that seemed almost sacred. It was a time when the world slowed down, when ordinary sounds became extraordinary, and when one could feel the pulse of life beyond immediate perception. The whispered truth from the previous day weighed gently in her mind, like a stone placed carefully in her heart. It was not heavy in a burdensome way, but it demanded attention and reflection. She had spent the morning and afternoon walking, thinking, and writing, preparing herself to meet the night with patience and awareness. Something about the quiet darkness called to her, as though it contained both the answers and the questions she had been seeking. Aeon walked slowly along the path leading into the hills, familiar and comforting. The shadows of the trees stretched long across the ground, their forms softened by the gentle moonlight. Each step she took seemed to echo softly in the night, a reminder that even in solitude, one could feel connected to the world. The hills around her were alive with subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the distant call of an owl, the faint trickle of a stream flowing over rocks. The night was not silent. It was filled with stories, memories, and presence waiting to be noticed. She reached the small clearing near the ancient circle of stones, the place she often visited for reflection. The stones were bathed in silver moonlight, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. Aeon knelt beside them, placing her hands lightly on the largest stone. The coolness seeped into her skin, grounding her, connecting her to the generations who had come before her. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, allowing the rhythm of the night to fill her senses. In this quiet space, she could feel the presence of her ancestors, not as ghosts, but as a living memory, a guiding force that had carried her family through the years. She thought of Daniel and the moment of revelation, the words he had whispered that had sparked a chain of reflection and understanding. He had not intended to change her life, perhaps, but the truth he had shared had found a home in her heart. It was a gentle truth, respectful yet powerful, like a seed planted in fertile soil. She had nurtured it throughout the day, walking, writing, observing, and now she waited to see how it might grow during the night. The air grew cooler, and Aeon wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. She noticed the faint glow of fireflies beginning to appear in the grass nearby, tiny points of light dancing delicately in the darkness. Their movement was slow, almost meditative, and Aeon watched them for a while, feeling a sense of calm and wonder. The world seemed larger at night, yet somehow more intimate, as if each small detail carried profound meaning. She settled down near the stones, sitting cross-legged, and allowed her thoughts to drift freely. Memories of her childhood came forward, her grandmother guiding her hands through planting seeds, her mother's gentle laughter, the quiet wisdom of elders she had grown up observing. Each memory was vivid and alive, yet calm, like threads woven into a tapestry that extended beyond time itself. She realized that the whispered truth was not just about history, it was about connection, understanding, and the continuity of life. The moon climbed higher, casting its pale light over the hills, making the shadows dance in soft, fluid movements. Aeon listened carefully to the sounds around her, the distant flowing of water, the gentle rustling of leaves, the occasional call of a night bird. Each sound was a reminder that life continued, that even in darkness, there was movement, growth, and vitality. She allowed herself to feel the rhythm of the world, to align her thoughts with the subtle patterns of nature, and to recognize that the night was not empty but full of meaning. Hours passed. Aeon remained near the stones, still and attentive, her presence quiet yet deliberate. The sky deepened into a darker shade, and the stars shone more brightly, each one a tiny beacon of light in the vast darkness. She thought about the stories of her ancestors, the challenges they had faced, the lessons they had learned, and the ways they had preserved their knowledge and wisdom. These stories were alive in her now, not as distant memories but as a living part of her understanding and identity. As midnight approached, Aeon felt a subtle shift in the air. It was not a dramatic change, but a gentle movement, as if the night itself had acknowledged her presence. She breathed deeply, feeling a calm energy rise from the earth through her body. It was a quiet strength, steady and reassuring, reminding her that she was part of a larger story, a story that included past, present, and future. She did not need to act. She only needed to be present to observe, and to allow the night to unfold its wisdom. Aeon's thoughts returned to Daniel. Though he was not physically present, she felt a connection to him through the truth he had shared, through the moment of recognition and understanding they had shared together. It was a subtle, almost imperceptible connection, yet it carried weight. She realized that the most meaningful moments often passed quietly, without fanfare, but their impact could be profound and lasting. The night continued, and Aeon shifted slightly, adjusting her position on the soft grass. She looked up at the sky again, noting the constellations she had known since childhood. The stars were familiar, yet every night they seemed to tell a slightly different story, depending on the perspective and attention of the observer. She felt a sense of humility and gratitude, recognizing that the universe was vast, and yet she was a part of it, connected to the world, her ancestors, and the living moment she inhabited. Time seemed to stretch and bend. Aeon did not keep track of hours or minutes. She only measured time by the rhythm of her breath, the movement of the wind, and the gentle shift of shadows across the ground. In this way, she became fully present, her senses alert, her mind calm, and her heart open. She allowed the night to guide her thoughts, to show her the subtle connections between memory, history, and life itself. As the early hours of the morning approached, Aeon sensed the night reaching a point of quiet climax. It was not dramatic or loud. It was subtle, like a gentle turning of a page in a book. She felt a deep understanding settle within her, a recognition that the whispered truth, the reflections of the day, and the quiet attentiveness of the night had combined to create a profound insight. The story of her family, the history of her ancestors, and the connection to the present moment were all part of a single, continuous flow. She stood slowly, stretching her arms toward the sky. The stars seemed to respond, shimmering more brightly in acknowledgement. Aeon felt a sense of completeness, not as an ending but as a continuation. She had met the night fully, embraced its silence, and allowed the wisdom of the darkness to settle into her being. The night had been a teacher, offering lessons in patience, observation, reflection, and connection. Walking back toward her home, Aeon noticed the subtle changes in the world around her. The first hints of dawn were appearing, a faint glow on the horizon signaling the approach of a new day. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of earth and wildflowers. She felt a sense of anticipation, not for dramatic events, but for the quiet unfolding of life, for the simple and profound experiences that make each day meaningful. Back in her home, she prepared a small tea, sitting by the window and watching the sky lighten. The night had passed, and yet its lessons remained, embedded in her thoughts, her heart, and her soul. Aeon realized that life is often most profound in these quiet, reflective moments, moments when one listens, observes, and allows the world to speak in its own language. She reflected on the journey she had taken, from the whispered words Daniel had shared, to the walks in the hills, to the circle of stones, to the deep nights spent in reflection. Each step had been significant, each moment a thread in the larger tapestry of understanding. She knew that there would be more challenges, more discoveries, and more quiet nights to come. But she felt ready, prepared to meet them with patience, insight, and a deep respect for the flow of life. Aeon took a final sip of her tea, setting the cup aside gently. She looked out at the hills, the valley, and the town, feeling a connection to all that surrounded her. The night had passed, but its presence lingered within her. She felt stronger, wiser, and more deeply aware of her place in the continuity of history and life. The whispered truth had opened a door, and she had walked through it with care, reflection, and respect. With a calm and steady heart, she prepared herself to embrace the coming day, knowing that life's stories unfold not in grand gestures alone, but in quiet attention, thoughtful reflection, and the willingness to listen. To others, to history, and to the subtle language of the world around her. The first light of dawn stretched gently over the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink, gold, and pale blue. Aeon rose slowly, feeling the warmth of the sun touch her face. The night had passed, leaving her with a calm sense of understanding and clarity. As she stood on the small porch of her home, she felt the quiet power of the morning, a time of new beginnings, gentle reflection, and the subtle promise of what lay ahead. She took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs with a refreshing clarity. The whispered truth Daniel had shared days ago was no longer a heavy weight but a part of her. It had settled into her heart, transforming into a quiet strength, a guide for her thoughts and actions. Aeon understood now that knowledge and understanding are not always about speaking loudly or acting immediately. Sometimes they are about patience, observation, and carrying wisdom carefully within oneself. After a simple breakfast, Aeon decided to walk toward the hills once more. The path she took was familiar yet ever-changing, shaped by the wind, the weather, and the passage of time. Each step reminded her of her ancestors and their journeys, their moments of joy, and the quiet resilience that had guided their lives. She felt connected to them in a way that was both gentle and profound, as if she were walking alongside generations who had come before her. Reaching the clearing with the circle of stones, Aeon paused. The stones glimmered softly in the morning light, their surfaces worn smooth by countless years. She touched the largest stone lightly, feeling its texture beneath her fingers. It was a simple act, yet it held immense meaning. This place, like her memories and the whispered truth she carried, connected her to something greater than herself, a continuous thread of life, history, and understanding. Aeon knelt and closed her eyes, letting her thoughts drift. She thought about Daniel, his sincerity, and the gentle way he had shared his discovery. His words had opened a door, yes, but it was her own reflection, patience, and attention that allowed the meaning of those words to take root. She realized that understanding is not simply about receiving knowledge. It is about nurturing it, allowing it to grow within, and using it to see the world in a new, deeper way. The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying the fragrance of wildflowers and fresh grass. Aeon opened her eyes and watched the sunlight dancing on the hills. She could feel the life of the land, the quiet rhythm of nature that had always guided her people. Birds sang their morning songs, insects buzzed gently among the flowers, and the distant river sparkled like a ribbon of light. Everything seemed connected, a reminder that life is made up of both ordinary and extraordinary moments, each carrying meaning in its own way. She remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about patience, resilience, and the importance of listening. Each story, once abstract and distant, now felt alive. She could see the lessons woven into the land itself, in the hills, the river, and the stones. The whispered truth she had received was part of this tapestry, a single thread that connected past, present, and future. Aeon understood that her role was not to speak of it loudly or seek attention, but to carry it with care, letting it shape her understanding and actions. Aeon spent the morning walking slowly through the hills, touching leaves, feeling the soil beneath her feet, and listening to the sounds of nature. Each detail seemed imbued with significance, each moment a small revelation. She thought about the people in the town, the neighbors who greeted her with gentle smiles, the children who played without worry, and the quiet routines of daily life. She realized that all of these small actions, these ordinary moments, were part of the greater story she was now a part of. Returning to the small stream, Aeon knelt and let the cool water flow over her hands. She watched as sunlight sparkled on the surface, creating tiny reflections that danced like moving stars. The stream seemed alive, carrying the memory of rain, hills, and distant clouds. Aeon smiled softly, feeling gratitude for this moment, for the life around her, and for the wisdom she had been gifted. She understood that life is full of small miracles, moments that might seem ordinary but hold deep significance when observed with care and attention. By midday, Aeon returned to the town. She visited the small market, greeting familiar faces and exchanging quiet smiles. Though life appeared ordinary on the surface, she carried within her a sense of extraordinary awareness. She noticed the laughter of children as they ran past, the careful arrangement of goods by shopkeepers, and the subtle gestures of kindness exchanged between neighbors. Each observation reminded her that history, memory, and connection exist not only in grand moments, but also in the gentle rhythms of everyday life. Back in her home, she took out her notebook and began to write. She wrote about the hills, the stream, the stones, the wind, the birds, and the people she had seen that morning. She wrote about the quiet presence of the night and the whispered truth she had received, now transformed into understanding. Her words flowed naturally, without pressure or hurry, capturing the essence of reflection and the richness of simple, attentive observation. As afternoon approached, Aeon prepared a small meal. She moved slowly and deliberately, savoring each step and gesture. Cooking was more than nourishment. It was a form of meditation, a way to connect with the present while honoring the wisdom of the past. She arranged the food carefully, appreciating the colors, textures, and aromas. Even ordinary tasks had taken on a quiet significance, reminding her that every action can carry meaning when approached with awareness and care. Afterward, Aeon sat by the window, watching the sunlight gradually soften as the day moved toward evening. She reflected on the journey she had experienced, from the whispered words of Daniel to her walks in the hills, her nights of reflection, and the quiet moments of observation. Each experience had been a step in understanding herself, her family, and the world around her. She realized that wisdom is not something handed down in a single moment. It is something cultivated through patience, attention, and openness to life. As evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of pink and orange, fading gradually into deep blue. Aeon walked once more to the edge of the hills, watching the valley below and the town settling into the rhythms of night. She could hear faint sounds of life, laughter, conversation, footsteps, but they felt distant, almost like a gentle hum in the background of her reflections. The quiet strength she had nurtured over the previous days filled her, a sense of peace that allowed her to witness life fully without needing to control or change it. She returned to the circle of stones one last time that day, kneeling gently in the moonlight. Aeon placed her hands lightly on the largest stone, feeling its cool surface and imagining the generations of her family who had once been present in the same space. She whispered a quiet prayer, not for recognition, not for change, but for understanding, guidance, and gratitude. The wind rustled softly through the trees, carrying her words as if acknowledging her presence, and Aeon felt a deep connection to the flow of life itself. Night fully arrived, and Aeon walked slowly back home, the stars glittering brightly above. She felt a sense of completion, not as an ending but as a natural step in the ongoing story of her life. She had embraced the night, nurtured the wisdom she carried, and allowed herself to be present in every moment. The journey had taught her that understanding is not always loud or dramatic. It is gentle, patient, and often quiet, yet deeply powerful. Back inside her home, she prepared for sleep. The lamp cast soft light across the room, illuminating her notebook, the locket, and the small collection of family mementos that had guided her reflections. She felt a sense of gratitude for these objects, not because they held magic or power, but because they connected her to the lives, lessons, and love of those who had come before. She lay down, wrapping herself in a warm blanket, and closed her eyes. Sleep came easily that night, gentle and restorative, carrying her into dreams where the past, present, and future intertwined. She wandered through hills, streams, and open fields, guided by the quiet wisdom of her ancestors. She saw herself walking with Daniel, not as a companion in the physical sense, but as someone whose presence had sparked insight and reflection. She understood now that some connections are invisible yet lasting, formed through attention, respect, and shared moments of truth. When Aeon awoke the next morning, the world was calm and ready. The hills were bathed in soft light, the air carried the faint fragrance of wildflowers, and the town began to stir once more. She rose with a sense of purpose, calm yet alert, ready to meet the day with awareness, respect, and openness. She carried within her the lessons of the whispered truth, the guidance of her ancestors, and the quiet strength she had nurtured over nights of reflection. As she stepped outside, Aeon smiled softly, feeling the continuity of life flowing around her. The journey she had taken was not about dramatic revelations or immediate answers. It was about understanding, connection, and the patient unfolding of truth. She moved forward with a sense of calm confidence, ready to embrace the days to come, knowing that life's wisdom is often found in quiet observation, careful reflection, and the willingness to listen, to history, to the world, and to the silent language of the heart. Aeon walked through the hills, past the streams and into the town, carrying the past with her in her heart, yet living fully in the present. She was no longer just a witness to history. She was an active participant in its continuity, ready to honor it, learn from it, and allow it to guide her every step. And in this quiet strength, she found not only understanding, but peace, a lasting connection to the life she had inherited, the truths she had received, and the endless journey that lay ahead.